Welcome back to the series of open conversations, part two of a very sensitive topic, psychoanalysis of rape. So far, we took up the understanding of rape on an individual and society basis. Somewhere in the discussion, we were discussing about the solutions to this heinous crime. Over to you, sir.
We were in the middle of a very interesting conversation on patriarchy. And
Right.
the interesting part there is that there are many types of rape which can happen even in a matriarchy.
Yes.
One part. Second part is the studies in anthropology, they tell us a very interesting part of the story. How psychoanalytic pathology adjusts itself to the environmental conditions.
Okay.
In some of the tribes that anthropologists have studied, they realize that if there is a tribe where instead of the father, the elder brother is supposed to be the head of the family, and it is upon him the responsibility of everybody once he grows up, including that of the sisters. So the sister is more of brother's responsibility than a father's responsibility.
Okay.
And in such tribes, they saw that many of the jokes which were related to the Oedipal condition were transferred to the sibling context. So there they found the contextuality of the Oedipal-like triangular situation moving from one context to another context. So this also is one aspect of it. As we also saw, many of the types of rape that we listed out, they actually are system neutral. Like if you don't manage urbanization properly, in either of the two, matriarchy or patriarchy, you can still have a lone wolf person. If there is a psychopathology oriented rape, it can still be there. If there is anger towards the woman, it can still be in matriarchy. So there are some parts which are system neutral, and there are some parts which definitely are system dependent. Like this whole idea of honor, purity associated with sexual non-penetration, and therefore rape becoming a revenge. That definitely has a patriarchal origin. So, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere when we were also talking about the reasons, and you mentioned about the unconscious id, the desire of overpowering and sexually, getting the gratification out, which can be seen visibly with people under use of substance, where their conscious level is low and they end up into such kind of crime where they did once they're back into their normal senses, even they are in that kind of a denial that how is this possible, which reflects upon the unconscious aspect of the human mind under the influence of substance. And many of the cases take place when people are heavily drunk or under the use of substances.
Very true. I think addiction is a very strong component of this whole thing. Of course, law and order also is important. It's when we get to the solutions, it can be from as simple as having lights on the road. It can be to understanding of the unconscious of the person. So all of these are parts of that full solution. You have lights on the road, it is one part. You have camera, it is second part. You have law and order where justice is quick, it's a third part. But these are not the only parts. There are other parts which are also parts of that complete solution.
yesterday I was there, one of the social they had presented a skit and on the same Kolkata rape case, and they had asked for a public view on how they can bring about the changes. And most of the women went like, we have to change the way we train our boys at home, like, and somewhere whenever we talk about solutions, we talk about the government, what it is supposed to be doing. We talk about the family system, what it is supposed to be doing. Why nobody is talking about the individual system? Because the change should come from within.
Right.
So exploring more into the solutions from our expert, we would like to go further into it. What is, according to you, are the solutions to this problem?
Solutions are at all levels because problems are at all levels. The problem is at individual level where the individual has to work on himself. There are problems which are at the family level where the family has to train men in a particular way. There are problems at social level where government has to do law and order, street lights and cameras, and a quick justice system. And then there are deeper social problems of urbanization. There are deeper problems of modernity. There are problems of advertising and social communication as it is used by corporates, where every product is sold using a woman who is provocatively portrayed. So if you have erotic images thrown at you 24/7, and then somebody asks you to be a rational man fully in control of oneself, how is it possible? That presupposes that man is completely in control of his unconscious, which is not true. So part of it also has to do with social communication, the way advertising is done. So all these are parts of larger solutions. So we can look at it in three ways. Sorry. At an individual level, it has to do with education and inner work. Education which includes idealism and spirituality to some extent. It includes spirituality which has mythology where women are respected, venerated, second component of it. Education where one looks at oneself to some extent and sees how the impulses build up and how one can work against the impulses. So there are some individual parts. Then the individual health part of maintaining a minimum level of human contact, a minimum level of human interaction, and teaching the person what happens to you when you go alone, so that when actually he goes alone, he knows what's happening to him, and he will do something to manage it to some extent. Because to a great extent, he himself is I should not use the word victim for the perpetrator, but he himself is under the control of his unconscious. So at individual level, there are certain things to be done. Then at the family level, as you rightly said, the training has to be there. And then at the social level, light from providing street lights to cameras, to police presence, to quick justice, to correct laws, all of this is there. And then you require quite a big budget on social communication to actually educate people on the issues we are talking about. So this is one component. The second component is related to the deeper social part of urbanization. How to take care of the lone wolf problem. How to take care of this moral retribution problem. How to take care of this humiliation problem. How to take care of this alienation problem, this problem that you are thrown and discarded by the society on a corner. It's like somebody who is standing as a security person or somebody who is a construction worker making a big building with a glass facade where the best of the boutiques and the brands are going to house themselves. And once the building is made, there is no place for this person inside the building. He has been discarded and thrown out of the building by the social class structure. And because the social class structure has discarded him and thrown him out of it, as though he is an unequal, a subhuman. He has a retributive rage towards the class structure and people who represent that class. So how do you handle him? Do you handle him through religion? Do you handle it through social education? Do you handle it by raising the minimum absolute standard? Do you address it by reducing the relative inequality? So those are the problems that are to be thought out. What works in the Indian situation? How to look at this social aspect of the lone wolf, the humiliated, the moral retribution, the alienated, the discarded, the poor on the perpetual margins. So this is a social aspect of the solution. And then we look at the deeper psychoanalytic solution, part of the problem, where we go into the psychoanalytic concepts as to how it can be done. That what pathologies are at work in this situation and how they come about and how it can be treated. And then do we go for some sort of a mass education? Do we go for group sessions? Do we go for individual sessions? Do we create call centers for this? So that is a second aspect of the problem. And then we have the larger cultural aspect of the problem. That how we have handed over culture to corporates. The culture which was guided by rishis and philosophers is now guided by the corporates who are concerned only about the quarterly performance. So if you look at corporate communication, all it does is to excite desires and excite sexuality. And you cannot have a man where you say, I will expose you to this thing 24/7 and yet you be in control of yourself all the same. It is suprahuman to expect from an ordinary human being. This also partly is true with respect to the clothing. And this is a very difficult question to answer. That how do you reconcile peacefully the rights of a woman to wear what she wants and the influence that it has on somebody who is coming from a completely different culture? So it is individual rights versus his cultural rights. Unfortunately, we are not factored in cultural rights in the urbanization debate. And that is a very big deficiency in that understanding. Then we have this whole public communication, mass communication hijacked by the corporates. Do you put some restrictions on the corporates on how to portray women or how to sell products? Unless those restrictions are put, nobody can control himself beyond a point. I don't mean to say that it gives a license to anybody, but this part of the problem has to be addressed. That we cannot have objectification 24/7 and then ask people not to indulge in objectification when the entire corporate communication is doing nothing but objectification. So if it is okay on television, how is it not okay for an individual? So this, and then the cultural part of it, the second cultural part of it, how do you create rituals and practices in the schools so that the mind starts looking at a woman as something other than only a sexual object? I shall remember the change because I have seen it myself. In my school days, this was never the case. People used to look at women as sisters, as friends in many ways, and this monochromatic way of looking 100% at every woman as a sexual object, it's a very late development. I have seen it myself, the change. And the culprit there is corporate communication. And the looking down upon our own traditions by finding out the fact that they are not perfect. Like there used to be a tradition of tying rakhis, of making brothers and sisters. Now, some of them may be doing it and yet having an affair, but that was not the majority. It was the exception, not the rule. To point it out and discard the whole thing is to take away a very important cultural practice. And then we had stories where there were stories of brothers and sisters, of friends and so on. Today we don't see any of such stories. The only stories that we see are of sexual pursuit. So this whole cultural sphere, which is giving an input into the mind, that input has to be managed. And you have to put in rituals which strengthen other components of the mind. So this is the cultural part of the problem. And lastly, the attachment part. It's very important. How do you manage the attachment vacuum, the losses that one feels from people, from place, from memories, from culture, from rituals, from practices, from entire ecosystem of life as one moves from a village rooted in culture to a heartless urban landscape, which is completely devoid of anything traditional. And this is a very important part of the whole transition. And we see many people who are caught in the act, who are caught in the crime, essentially fall either in this uprooted category or in the psychopathic category. I mean the psychoanalytic category.
Okay.
So this is a broad stroke of how solution has to be thought about. And it brings us also to a very important part of modernity and the closure of modernity. Because all that the corporates are doing actually is nothing but the flow of modernity. And in that flow of modernity, the pre-modern good things have been thrown out of the window. And as we discussed before, I expect the closure of modernity around 2032. And in a tapering part that has already started. So I think soon we should be hearing voices of non-modernity flavor. And that is where some of the good practices that I saw in my childhood and some that I would not have seen, but they would have been there before, they can be brought back, refreshed, rejuvenated, reinstituted into the culture. So this is how a broad solution package needs to be thought about. It's a very deep thinking. It's not a law and order problem only. Of course, law and order is important. All of that is important. But you cannot solve the problem, and we see in practice it has not been solved by that approach.
Once we enter into the psyche of the rapist, and is it to do with the pleasure drive or the libido? Is it to do with the perversion? Is it to do with what? So can we explore further psychoanalytically what kind of people or group are more prone to that?
Right. First, let us look at the social conditions, as we said. The lone wolf, the uprooted, the one facing a superego crisis, the one faces the attachment crisis, the one humiliated, the one put on the margins. So that is one set of people. Now, psychoanalytically coming to the process part of it, those with very difficult abandonment issues coupled with hatred towards women, which can be because of difficult experiences with the mother, difficult experiences with other women, or difficult experiences with elite women that they report to or they serve. So this abandonment plus anger towards women is one category. Oedipal entanglement is second category. Oedipal entanglement, which would not allow the person to actualize his masculinity, and then the proving of masculinity and the rage would go onto some woman who is much younger to him, usually somebody in the teens. That is second category. The unrealized masculinity because of either, as we said, Oedipal entanglement, or too dominant a mother or too dominant a father, or a complete absence of father figure, the complete absence of the paternal. So that is the third category where one can do it to prove one's masculinity to oneself and to others. Is perversion, where there is a superego problem. The superego pathology leads to perversion, and often coupled with narcissism, it enables a person to act out the fantasies. There is no control of the ego or the superego, and there is a inflated sense of self, inflated sense of omnipotence coming from narcissism. That's another category. Psychosis is one more category, where the projections are such that either one wants to punish, or one wants to brutalize, or one wants to prove one's strength, or there is some other story going on, but somehow the psychotic orientation or a functioning psychosis leads one to this. It's more likely to be a latent or partial psychosis, but it can be a full psychosis. Repressed rage, very common.
Yes.
This can come from rage towards the mother, rage towards other women, rage towards the bosses, rage towards those you serve, rage towards those who don't accept your morality, rage towards those who are doing that you don't believe women should be doing. Those who you believe should be submissive to you are now above you in the hierarchy. So this is the second, repressed rage. Then is the question of revenge. That something has happened to you very specifically. It is not just the moral rage looking at society in general, but somebody has done something to you and you want to seek revenge, and you may literally rape that person, or if you don't have the courage, you can displace it and do it on somebody else. And this revenge can happen at an individual level, also at a group level. So there would be rape at the group level, gang rapes of different types out of revenge. There can be a superego pathology, as we said, which can lead to perversions of different types. Or it can lead to, if not complete psychopathy, maybe antisocial orientation. And then this can happen. If it couples up with narcissism and the person believes he can get away. Fantasies. One is captured completely by fantasies and one wants to act it out. Too much of pornography can lead to it. Addiction to pornography, where you see this kind of pornography again and again, and it becomes normalized. You don't see it as a crime anymore. You see it as a very normal thing because you see it every day. So that is addiction to pornography. And you can have a combination of somebody who is narcissistic, but at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of economic class. So the narcissism is hurt so badly, given his economic class, that he has to put rage out on somebody. And especially if that narcissistic injury involves rejection by women or humiliation by women, then it channelizes that rage, which otherwise is coming from many sources, towards a particular woman. So psychoanalytically speaking, all of this at an analytical, deeper level in process terms predispose people to doing this thing.
Also to do with the sadistic and masochistic unconscious desires.
Yes.
Like we see people in, especially in marital rape, this comes on the surface where men, instead of going for physical violence only solely, it ends up with a rape.
Right.
It is to do with not only the sadistic, but the aggressive, the surrendering of the other person, the dominance is acted upon. So it is not just the sadism, it is also to do with the power play. So that the need of acting out in a violence, because sexual act itself, in the way it is occurring these days, it is no more a spiritual play. It is more of a physical aggression being downloaded to the other person.
Correct. It's become very heavy in aggression now.
Yes, so that also contemplates to a scenario where this can become a pleasure drive for many of the people.
Correct. So there's a huge amount of aggression which is fused with sexuality. So
Right.
that when it acquires a omnipotent, perverted, or sadistic tone, it gets into dissent.
Right.
Because you can have aggressive sex, which is consensual also. You can have sadistic sex, which is consensual also. And you can take the same thing into a non-consensual context, and it becomes very brutal. So when we have this thing combining with that power play, with the moral retribution, with the moral rights play of how a woman should be, and if she's not, she should be made into that way. She should be taught a lesson. That moral thing which goes on along with that masculine thought, which is largely patriarchal, that becomes a potent combo for turning sexuality and aggression into this non-consensual act.
So is a way out there of reducing rape to a minimum possible?
There is a way, definitely, because we can see the difference across cities. And in both the cities, people from the same racial background, the same genetic structure are living. And the culture also is relatively near to each other. We can see that in India itself. That people in one city don't commit and people in other city commit at a very high scale. So one city becomes a rape capital and second city becomes a safety capital. So, and both the cities are in India. Both the cities have predominant Hindu population. Both the cities share the same past, the same heritage. Both the cities share the same genetics. So obviously the differences in there largely lie in childhood upbringing, in governance, and in culture, the local subculture. So if we set it right, definitely we can reduce it. I would apply there the rule of 75. That the measures that we speak about, 75% of them will work on 75% of people, 75% of time. But that is a very big shift. It will turn a city from a fearful rape capital to a safe city. Does that mean in a safe city rapes don't happen? No. Just as we cannot stop corruption and stealing, we cannot bring rape to zero. But it can be brought to a level where it is exceptional, it is rare, and the city is safe. And one measure of that is there should be no fear for women to go out alone at night. And the number of rapes reported per month should not exceed a particular low percentage. So can we bring difficult cities into the safe zone? We can bring it. Can we reduce it to zero? No, we cannot. And how do we do it? By looking at the holistic situation and going for a holistic addressing of it, and which would involve very strict action on social communication of corporates and doing social communication on the part of the government to bring in non-sexual, non-objectifying elements between men and women. It's very important.
Controversial and yet stimulating. Do write of your take on it. See you all again. Namaste.
Namaste.